the big vision is to really open up game creation to everyone. And of course, there's lots of tools out there like Unity and Unreal. I heard Tom once he likened them to like flying a jet aircraft.
So where do you come in the analogy then? What's the aircraft analogy for Construct?
Oh, I don't know, a bicycle maybe.
A bicycle.
just hop on and go.
Hello and welcome to That Tech Show, the show that reveals the magicians behind the magic that is everyday technology.
Oh gosh, it's hot. So if you're in the UK, I hope you've all been keeping safe and staying hydrated, of course, and checking in with those elderly and less able, because this week...
It's cracking the flags.
What?
It's cracking the flags.
What does that mean?
Have I heard that before?
No.
Yeah, the phrase cracking the flags is for when it's so hot.
I thought that would be when it's so cold, the flag is kind of frozen.
No, cracking the flags is a hot weather thing.
It's been topping 39 degrees, and if you're outside of the UK, we're not used to it, all right? We're not prepared, and it's been a scorcher.
Speaking of scorchers, our previous episode with Blake Lemoyne has exceeded all expectations on YouTube, getting more than 10,000 views. So if you're watching this on YouTube, hello. That was our first video episode, so you can expect a little bit more of that from now on. And actually, if you've only subscribed on YouTube, there's another 61 episodes, podcast episodes, audio only. So check those out.
Get with the times. God. So who do we have on the show today?
Well, today we have a double trouble. We have Tom and Ashley, the creators of gaming platform Construct 3.
Can you imagine building a multinational computer game company with your brother?
I think most of us would just end up fighting, wouldn't we? I certainly would.
I think so. Well, and anyway, Tom and Ashley give us a wholesome grassroots insight into what it takes to growing a company from humble beginnings to one of the most popular game development platforms on the internet, and how it became so popular in NASA.
Well, let's hear from Tom and Ashley.
My name is Thomas. I'm the co-founder and Ashley's brother, and I work in business development and making the website in our startup.
Well, I didn't know you were brothers. That's cool.
Yeah.
So I mean, I was going to ask how you met, but so how did you actually come together to start a business anyway?
I got the ball rolling in the early days. I'd actually been working on an open source version of our game creation software called Construct Classic for a few years, and I was coming to graduate from my university course, and I was thinking about having to get a job and make money for once in my life. I was reading a lot about Y Combinator and the startup scene in the US, and thought I'd give it a go, start a company, make a commercial version of our software. And I realized I'd need a website and someone who sort of probably cares a bit more about making money than I do. And Tom has quite a good track record of actually starting businesses from ever since he was a teenager. And he was my brother. It's good to have someone you trust as a co-founder. So I asked him, and I managed to drag him away from this, was it a printing company who weren't paying you? So I don't think it was too difficult to get him away from that. Does that sound accurate, Tom?
Yes, that sounds accurate. And our customers are going to hate me when I say this, but Ash's original plan was to make it pay what you want model, and I was like, no, Ash, we need to charge money for this, and that's how we started basically.
There you go. Commercial mindset is really important. Anyway, so what year was this? Because what year was all this happening?
We recently celebrated our 10-year anniversary. Okay. So we've been going just over 10 years, and we didn't have cake yet, so we need to have that soon.
Were you a HTML5 or ActionScript platform at that time?
So, I think the early development work was done around 2011, and we went with HTML5, which at the time was a pretty controversial choice. There's a lot of people saying, Flash is a big deal. That's the obvious choice. HTML5 is just a fad. I wonder where those people are now, because I'd just like to say I told you so to them. But very petty of me. But it's quite it's quite a big gamble, and it's worked out incredibly well, far better than we hoped. Obviously, well, I don't know if everyone knows this, but Flash was finally fully retired around 2020, I think, and now HTML5 is just the go-to web sort of media technology.
Was it really that recently? Because I think they've been deprecating it for almost a decade, haven't they?
Yeah, but when you work in software and you try to get rid of something, you realize that you have all these big customers who take years to do anything.
Yeah, like IE6, I suppose.
Yeah, taking stuff away in software always takes a long, long time.
There was I think it's the South African government had a form set up in ActionScript that took all the election, something to do with elections or voting or something, and they had that built. So instead of, because it was built in Flash and they didn't make it into HTML for some bizarre reason, it's just a basic form. They had to like redo a browser. They had to like basically fork Edge or Chrome or something and launch a browser so you can actually still use their form, because obviously all the other platforms are just deprecating Flash. So yeah, it's hard to get rid of stuff. I mean, even IE, yeah, like you say, Chris, even IE's just about dying or something. I don't know. It's
I think forking a browser seems like the wrong way to go about that solution, but
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, definitely.
so who's the older brother then? Is that
That'll
Thomas?
be me, Tom. Yes.
I was guessing by the fact that you had a history and you had been working in a print company that wasn't paying you. Why weren't they paying you?
I think they just had some money issues or something. But yeah, ever since I think about 12, I've been making websites, and I was very lucky. Very early on, I set up the first job I ever had was modifying forum software. So create plugins for forum software, and then I got an email one day, and it said, hey, can you make these changes for us? And I think I was 14 or 15 at the time. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't have the unpaid time to do this. And then they emailed back, said, no problems. How much do you want to charge? I said a number I thought was ridiculous. And they're like, cool, let's go. And I ended up working on the official Toyota Formula One fan
Really?
website. Yes, that was very, very good time. And it's slightly awkward when they phoned me up and my mum picked up the phone and said, Thomas, there's someone weird on the phone for you. And they're like, how old are you? But I think
Oh
it's
wow.
nice looking back. If we had the same experience in reverse, I think that'd be amazing. I think someone that's entrepreneurial like that, I think is nice. So yeah, that was the first job I had.
That's very cool. And so, Ash, were you doing that sort of stuff as well before you went off to study, or had you had a slower introduction into software?
I had a slower and less profitable introduction to software, really. So I started when I was a teenager. I was interested in making games myself, and I would make this classic mistake of trying to create these huge, colossal games with a massive scope when I didn't really know what I was doing, and then struggle to get anywhere with it. And then I thought the answer to my problems in game creation was to make my own game creation tool, which I'd then make the game in. And I ended up working on this Construct Classic, the open source version of the software. And so that was around for about 4 years before we got to Construct 2. And so I was just working in my spare time as a student, working on this open source game creation software, which is a great way to learn. If you just write code and get it out there and have people using it, it's an amazing way to learn. You get real customers or real users. One way or another, and make something for them. And then that moved on to the Construct 2, which we sold as a commercial product.
Talking about difficulty of retiring old products is very interesting. So I think Construct Classic's still being downloaded now. I think it's
Yeah, I think it's still getting like 1,000 downloads a month or something. It was
Wow.
retired in 2012, like 10 years ago.
And with this was like the advent of HTML5 being more than just, obviously static websites and stuff like that. What was the uptake like in these early years, given that, quite frankly, everyone was so used to building things in Flash and ActionScript, it was so easy to create these games. We're all kind of like trying to think, well, how would you do that in HTML and all the rest of it? Were games slow to market? Was there a bit of a lull or a dead spot in kind of game development around that time?
Well, it's interesting that we're still a fairly small player in the market in the grand scheme of things. So I wouldn't say that at any point we've sort of taken off and hit the big time in a really big way. Hopefully that will happen one day. Um, the main market for our product are hobbyists and indie game developers, or it was back then in the early days. We're quite big in education now as well, and so a lot of people would be sort of trying out ideas and making game prototypes and things, and wouldn't necessarily publish their games at all. And or quite a lot of people would just make very small, simple, fun games which are quick to make and publish them as web games to arcades like Newgrounds and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always been quite a big market for us. And really, I think the company's grown with the development of the technology as well. So back in like 2012, HTML5 was very slow, janky, difficult to get working well. And now 10 years later, the technology is completely changed. The web is now a really strong gaming platform. But then you can throw into it all the commercial considerations, like people want to publish to Steam, they want mobile web apps, mobile apps in the store, as you can do web apps as well, of course. And so that all can be done with web technology, and it is done with web technology. But I think there's a perception issue there. People still think that you need native technology to do something serious, but it's not the case.
Absolutely, I'm an advocate for native. I've just learned about service workers, which I'm very excited about, and that allows me to at least approach that kind of native, start accessing some of the native APIs and various things like that on websites and whatever. So where are we now then? So we've formed a company back in 2000. You actually registered with HMRC and like formed this company back in 2011 at this point.
Yes, yeah, we formed the company and we took on a small amount of angel investment. That's very, very early on, and not much, not in the grand scheme of things, not a huge amount of money, but it's useful at the time to sort of give us a safety net. And we were sort of in our bedrooms, just working in the evenings, and then we registered the company and started selling it, and we were completely had no idea how many we'd sell. Ashley thought I was mad by saying we might sell 100 copies, I think I said.
Yeah, by Christmas.
And then we ended up selling over 500 or something, so we're very happy. But yeah, very, very small operation right at the beginning. And I think going back to, talking about HTML5 technology, I think a key thing is the product has grown with the technology. So Construct 2 was the first product, which was a Windows program. It made HTML5 games. Then as the HTML5 technology improved, we actually made the entire editor in HTML5 as well that makes HTML5 games. So as the technology's grown, our products sort of evolved with it as well as.
And under the hood, then, so what is that? Were you developing your own libraries? Were you bootstrapping? Kind of, I'm assuming Construct now is a UI layer over the top of creating games. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, so we've built our own. We built our own library really. So the game engine is all our own custom code. We don't use any library for that, and it's the same with the editor. We don't actually use any kind of frameworks or UI libraries for that. It's all in-house developed by ourselves, which I think is an advantage in our case because it's especially going back to 2017 when that first launched. It's a very specialist kind of thing, game creation software, full desktop grade software which runs in the browser, and it gives us full control to make sure it works nicely.
The code base is quite substantial, isn't it, Ash? It's hundreds of thousands of lines of JavaScript.
Yeah, about can't remember the last time I counted it. About 600,000 lines, all told, I think.
And the first word that comes into my mind is basically physics, and that obviously being a bit of a a huge aspect to games and stuff. Was this first version? Did it have physics? Were you what was your were you iteratively launching like more advanced kind of aspects? I mean, you might have had physics from the beginning. That just made me think about kind of maybe how you might have iterated. So did you launch with the kind of product that you were very happy with? Or you were like, okay, let's get to this point, launch that, and then we've got this kind of backlog of all these features that we want to add a little bit later on.
Construct has hundreds of features, and it's always been challenging developing it because you've got thousands of customers who are all asking for different things, and so you have to ruthlessly prioritize things. So in the early days, we focused on like simple 2D games where you can make like a platformer, your player can run along and jump between platforms, and then we gradually over time, roughly in order of importance, we've tried to sort of add more and more on top of that. So we've now even got some simple 3D features. There's some JavaScript coding features in there as well. There's some cool visual effects and some amazing stuff you can do with layer effects and stuff. So yeah, there's an awful lot there. And on physics specifically, we do have a physics engine. We've had it from fairly early on. And now it's powered by WebAssembly, so it's very high performance as well. It's based on the Box 2D engine. And the thing is, physics engines have very high performance overhead, so you don't have to use it. You can use sort of simple calculated movements instead.
I think our philosophy as a company as well is sort of release early, release often. We're sort of big believers in the minimum viable product. We get friends and come to us and say, to launch this idea, or people we meet, and we're always like, minimum viable product is so important. Just get something out there quickly, and then just iterate on that just constantly. We're not scared of releasing new features on the website or in the products that might not work 100% perfectly, but we just want to get out the door and keep going from there, basically. So I think Construct 3, there's a new release weekly, and just always willing to test and throw new things out there.
So when you started out, then what was the vision for what you were trying to create? Because obviously, selling these 500 copies, that's going to be a big win for something. I mean, that was just you two, right?
Yes, that's just me and Ash.
And was that actually the foundation of this desktop engine to create HTML5 games?
Yeah, that was what launched us, and then sales continued basically for the next 10 years up to now, just strongly. So that's the seed that sort of launched us.
That's an awful lot to do just for two of you, I suppose, to get to a saleable product.
It is a huge amount of work, yes, and luckily nowadays we have a bigger team. We're still a small company. There's about 6 of us that work full time at the moment, so which is nice. But even though we have 6 people working for us, the workload still seems high, and we're still working very hard, both of us.
That goes back to the importance of what Tom said about the minimum viable product. Is we released so early that it was actually kind of embarrassing. The software really had very few features in it. It was actually difficult to make anything because there's so many things were missing. And our approach was just get it out there, start improving it, and then we'll worry about sort of which features we have later down the line.
So how are you upgrading and releasing then? If you'd sold the product, but I suppose this is how were you selling it? Were you doing over the air upgrades, etc. to this, or?
So I think the strategy we've always had is Ashley's skills in making the product very, very good. So it's important. I think we've always felt it's important. Ashley's time is always spent on developing the product and adding new features. And then my very early on, before we had more of a team, my job was to manage the sales, manage the website, and sort of bring everything together. If that makes sense, if that answers the question.
So that was your entrepreneurial spirit coming back.
That was just the entrepreneurial spirit coming back. Yes, and sorry, I've sort of lost track of what the question was actually there.
Well, I mean, originally my question was more about what the vision was for that initial product, and then once you'd actually got this, what you described as a little bit shonky product out of the door,
Yeah.
um, how were you then upgrading it? Were you providing packaged upgrades to the customers that had bought it? Was it, you know,
I think on Vision, it is important to mention that Construct allows people to make games without programming. It's a drag and
right?
drop
Yeah.
based
And web
system.
based, from my understanding, right?
Yeah, and web based. So now it all runs in the browser, and so it's designed. It's like PowerPoint for games. So you don't have to be technical. You can just drag and drop and build a game without doing any programming. You can also do JavaScript programming if you want to, but we sort of mainly market it as a drag and drop game engine. And the big vision is to really open up game creation to everyone. So if you're an artist or a designer or like a kid in a school and you've got an idea for a game, it makes it possible to do it. And of course, there's lots of tools out there like Unity and Unreal, but I think I heard Tom once mention at a conference, he likened them to like flying a jet aircraft. Uh, there's just so many controls, so many options. It's like you think about the cockpit of those jet airliners with buttons everywhere. Um,
So where do you come in the analogy then? What's the aircraft analogy for Construct?
I don't know, a bicycle maybe.
A bicycle.
just hop on and go.
What was the market like at this point then? Who was out there, and sort of what were they doing that was that you wanted to kind of overthrow, or that you wanted to differentiate yourself? Like, what was the landscape like at this point?
So, I think we want to differentiate ourselves by making it incredibly easy. So we want like simple software which doesn't overwhelm you, easy to use. Like I say, like PowerPoint, you don't have to have training in PowerPoint to use the basics. You can just sit down, throw a presentation together, and just figure it out as you go. And we'd like the same thing to be possible with our software. And that's slightly underselling it. It's got tons of really great features, but that's the principle behind it. That's the way in, and then you can obviously go a long way with it as well. And I think I'm very passionate about web technology, and I think I felt like the thing I've got to prove is that web technology is great, browsers are great, and they can do really good games as well. And that's always been a key differentiating factor for us. We've always been web only. Browser technology runs all our games on all platforms, and we've always resisted, even to quite a lot of pressure in the past, making native engines, which would open a huge sort of technical can of worms and really make development far, far more complicated, which as a small company is just probably infeasible.
I think it's interesting. It's quite a balancing act because the engine is sophisticated, but we're trying to keep to that vision of keeping things simple. So I think talking about the landscape of other products, I think we've seen some of our competitors start marketing towards easy game development, but they add so many features. They start going towards the fighter jet cockpit sort of style almost by accident. So I think it's very, very key in our minds to make sure that's not the route we go, and this is our niche, and that's where we are.
Just to clarify, when you say brought on to build the website, when you say website, are you referring to the platform itself, or are you talking, because I just think marketing website when I hear that.
So what we've always thought was very important very early on is when Ash had Construct Classic, he'd already built a community of users who are using that software. So that's why we could get those 500 sales very early on, because there's people that knew Ash had made a game engine, and even though the product was rough and ready, they believed in the process, they believed the future. So very key to us was to sort of maintain and keep that community, and the way we did that is we our website isn't just a marketing nowadays the trend is you have a very simple website and it's sort of marketing by now, and our website's far more community based. So we have a arcade where people can upload and show their games, which we see as a nice marketing platform. We have a forum, we have an asset store where people can sell their assets to other users. And also with Construct 3 now, because it runs in the browser, the website is quite integral in how the product's actually launched and distributed. Whereas before it's just a simple download. Now it's far more tied into the website. And I think it's interesting because we always see if something's, this sounds trivial, but if something's difficult to do, we always see that as an opportunity where maybe our competitors won't be bothered to do it. So we see that as an opportunity. So as a very simple example, you go to a lot of websites where you sign up for an account, and then if you want to use the forum, you have to use another account. And there's a lot of friction there, and I find that very irritating. So we've really spent a lot of time making everything mesh together really nicely, and no hiccups like that. And the website is a huge project, and that's what I try and spend most of my time on now.
I feel like Tom doesn't always get enough credit because I work on the sort of the product of the game creation software, and Tom does pretty much everything else, which is, I think, like there's two halves to the business. There's the half of the product that you see and the half of the website and all the services behind it that aren't always as visible. And Tom's been toiling away on those for years and not always getting as much credit for it. So just want to big you up there, Tom.
Thank you. I think one of the biggest pain points for us, and it still is today, is tax and VAT is incredibly complicated, especially when you're selling small transactions like we do worldwide. It is an absolute nightmare, and there's not really any products. I think it might be different now, but definitely back, 5 years ago, there's no sort of accounting packages that would sort of do all the VAT for you, and it's such a huge pain point. Um, we've solved it now, but it took a lot of work, and especially with Brexit, it just throws the spanner in the works again. And
I think we've sold to like 100 countries, haven't we, Tom?
yeah, at least 100 countries. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing about software is you can sell to any country in the world, but then you have to deal with like the tax of anywhere in the world, which can be complicated. And I think we've even had to sort of like look up US sanctions lists and make sure we're not accidentally selling into any countries not meant to.
Wow. So, we're a tech show, so we're not going to get too much into the tax, but I'm sure our listeners would be really interested to know because startups and all the rest of it would be selling to multiple countries and stuff like that. So, short and sweet then. So, what is this issue with tax? Do you have to abide by individual tax laws of the places that are the jurisdictions that are buying your software?
So every country in the EU will have a different tax rate, but also the tax rate can depend on what sort of customer you are. If you're an individual or business, it's different as well. And since Brexit, you have to fill out your. I won't go into it too much because it's not very interesting, and I've lost track. I've offloaded that to our managing director now, which is good. So I hear the complaints, but I'm less involved now. But it's incredibly complicated, and especially if you're a tech business in the UK selling worldwide, it is a big pain point. And my advice would be, if that's what you're going to be doing, is really understand the rules and really sort of nail that very early on, because it just gets worse and more complicated the longer you leave it. We get strange. We get we get invoices from the Italian tax authority saying we owe them €3 20p because we worked it out just slightly wrong at some point. So they're all on it, and yeah.
And this is made extra hard by the small transactions because
It's just more volume for more volume for bookkeeping and reconciliation. It's just adds volume. It'd be a lot easier if we sold the product for £10,000 a time once off. But we sell for different amounts in different countries. So, for example, in India, we're trying to stimulate sales by really reducing the price. So then you might have hundreds of transactions that are £2 each, and it takes not that there's any VAT to pay in India, but that's difficult to that adds burden onto everything.
So then, on that note, what is, and piracy is probably going to be a bit of an issue for, well, maybe is an issue or a topic of conversation, but what's to stop someone VPNing themselves into India and getting those games at a low price?
Yeah, so I can't devolve all our secrets, but it's when you make a sale, you have the card company will often give you very strong clues as to the origin of the customer. We also have our own some technology that also hints to the origin. So it's quite obvious to us when someone's purchasing it from a place that they're not permitted to, and then we sort of deal with it on that basis.
Did you learn that the hard way or the easy way?
By design, just the easy way. Actually, yes, it wasn't difficult. No, yeah.
But I suppose things like tax, that's probably slightly the hard way, as you go, oh my God, we've got a load of things we've got to deal with that we hadn't expected.
Yes, that was made very hard mode by Brexit and all these changes. Made that very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you talk about like the span across the globe, because obviously we can see our listeners and where they're coming from across the globe, and we really do cover most of the globe. It's incredible, but obviously we don't have to deal with any of the tax stuff because we're not selling anything. But yeah, I can't imagine how difficult it. Do you have to deal with like the sales tax in individual states in the US as well? Then
Yeah, you do. When you reach a certain threshold, some states will be once you start selling over $100,000, you need to start paying sales tax in this country. Other
wow.
countries are
And per state as well, isn't it?
per state. Some countries are like once you reach this amount of revenue, you need a representative in this country to do your tax for you. It's insanely complicated. Yeah.
So I bet you're glad you're not dealing with that now. Then it's...
I'm very happy I'm not dealing with that. Hello, Roger. Thank you for dealing with that.
So, is there any advice then for anybody who's in this sort of situation of starting to sell internationally? Do they need Roger's phone number or?
Roger's phone number? Yeah, give Roger a ring. No. I think the products, the accounting software out there has come on a long way now. So I think you need to understand the problem. I think then you need to research a solution that fits for you and really find a nice match as early as possible.
I was going to say, so moving then swiftly on to you said you're a team of 6 now, right?
Yeah.
When did hiring decisions start to take shape in the company, and what was that experience like?
That was a very interesting experience for us. So once Construct 2 was selling well, we realised what would be really great is to have another employee working alongside Ash, sort of accelerate the growth of the product. And as two young people working at, we had an office at that point, a very simple office, but that proposition was absolutely petrifying for us. We had no idea what we were doing. We didn't know that we wanted to do things properly. We didn't want to break any rules. So we thought maybe we need some assistance in sort of this step. So we actually thought it might be good to take on a manager or someone to guide us. And we started looking, and we were introduced to, before we met Roger, we were introduced to some sort of headhunting VC firms who sort of matchmake you with some managers, and that didn't work out because it was enormously expensive. I think these companies were sort of they're expecting a 6-figure salary and a 6-figure finder's fee, and we're just like, okay, this is the wrong way to do it. So we went back to the drawing board, and we're scratching our heads. And we had a family friend who runs a business, and he says, oh, I know this guy called Roger who's looking for a change. He might be a good match. And so Roger came in and we met him, and we got on really, really well. And as a sort of trial, he helped us recruit our first employee, Diego, which went really well. And Roger gave us a lot of confidence to sort of grow in this way. And that went well. And we thought it'd be really great to take Roger on at that point. And that's how we started the hiring process. But it's very scary, going from 2 people to 3 people is scary. Going from 3 people to 6 people is a big step. And I read about this with bigger companies. Going from 6 to 20 is enormously scary as well, and 20 to 100. There's big stepping stones which are very difficult to manage. And also, I think as a small team, when you take a hire, you're sort of adding 50% manpower to the team with one recruit. So it's absolutely essential that that person is really skilled at their job. If you take someone that isn't really pulling their weight in a much bigger company, that can sort of blend in. With a small company, it just can't work. Yeah.
Had you either of you had experience of like hiring other developers, other people, etc., before working in Construct?
Not at all. No. Brand new to us.
So that must have been quite difficult then to sort of figure out whether this person that you were going to hire was going to be effective.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We learnt a lot, and you can tell a lot from an interview sometimes, but other times, it can be tricky. You can interview someone who seems really great, and then maybe they're not the right fit as well. And I've read a lot about this, and I think my conclusion is no one really understands how to hire perfectly. Uh,
True
and
that.
it's ultimately when they sit down and start doing the work for real
Yeah.
is when you find out if they're good for the job or not.
That's why probation periods exist.
I mean, I would agree with you on that. I mean, we've done quite a lot of conversations with various recruiters and various people who are doing recruiting, and I mean, I was counting it up, and I think I've done maybe 1,000 interviews now,
Wow.
which is ridiculous, frankly. And I don't think that any. I think there's a lot to be said for bad interviewing techniques that need to change. I think an interview, especially for a tech one, you should always come out with everybody feeling like they've learned something. And so the thing that really bothers me about like tech interviews specifically is when people get asked random questions about an API, for example, that they have on Google that they can look up, or they get walked out of the door or something like that. It just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And I think everything should be about creating like a good candidate experience. And I've been doing, also the other thing that really bothers me as well is like when you get like a refactoring test or something like that, it's not a good idea to give for the first impression for your company to be, here is a piece of shit code we'd like you to look at. That's not a good thing for the candidate, is it? But no, I think there's so many different, so many different impressions, and I've certainly made hiring decisions that I thought were good decisions that you only learn in the once they're actually on the ground and doing the work as to whether they're any good or not. And I think it's really difficult. I suppose it doesn't matter if you've done 1,000 interviews or 10 or none. You kind of have to go on the feel and the relationship you create with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure if it's different in different industries, but what we think is you'd take a programmer on, and we usually wouldn't expect them to do much productive for 4 or 6 months. As they're sort of learning the code base and learning how things work. So as an outlay for a small business, is an extremely risky process. Because you can be 6 months down the line before you realise maybe technically this isn't working.
Yeah, and new code bases are quite difficult to learn, especially if they're or 600,000 lines long, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, one does not simply walk into a 600,000 line code base and change whatever you like.
That sounds like a meme to me.
Yeah.
You're always talking about Webflow. So what is Webflow?
Well, Webflow is a platform completely online, completely in the browser, that allows you to build websites using no code, zero code. I mean, it has the potential to build low code websites. That's low code, but its real power is in the no code way of building websites. I don't know, it's fantastic. A lot of designers, I would say, have actually built their careers off of Webflow, which is really powerful, really, because a lot of them weren't able to offer this kind of service. So designers are picking up Webflow and building their whole careers being able to design a website and then being able to actually implement it and earn a great living off of building Webflow websites. So you want to start up a new company or bought your domain name through namecheap.com, affiliate link down below in the description, then you can link that to a Webflow website and start designing, start building a website with absolutely no code. And they do also have a templating library as well, so you can go out and buy a template to get started. And my first Webflow website was built, I kid you not, 4 hours.
So if you want to code along with Sam, then you can click the affiliate link that we have in our description for this episode, wherever you're listening to it, or you can head over to thattech.show and take a look at the affiliate links there and click through to Webflow. And by doing that, you're going to be giving something back to That Tech Show, because we get a little bit of kickback when you click that button.
There you go. No excuses.
Going back to interview techniques, though, and I totally agree with what you're saying. I think the relationship is number one, and what we have found, contrary to sort of forward thinking advice we've read online about interview techniques, we have actually found that short exams have been incredibly revealing. So we generally in an interview will have nothing too onerous, sort of something you can finish in 10 minutes maybe, and we found a lot of people. We've avoided recruiting decisions based on that test because a lot of people talk very well, and when you give them a simple coding task, it falls flat on their face. And going back to before, maybe that person would fit better in a big corporate where it's there's more assistance, but for us, that's a no go at this early stage. So that's been a useful tool for us.
People do make the point that all programmers have like Google and web searches to look things up, but it's very revealing, I think, still, if you give someone a very simple function to write and they don't get it right. I think
Yeah.
it's a signal, one of many signals.
Yeah, I mean, I did an interview just the other day where I said that, it is open book. I will allow you to Google things. And, there was a fair amount of Googling, but they got the job. Because you kind of want to see how they Google, right? Because I think a lot of programming is often how good you are at using Google to find the source of your problem. It's Stack Overflow driven development.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. I'm not sure I'm speaking for you, Ash, but every day using Google and Stack Overflow, yeah, absolutely important. It's how you solve the problem is important, and it's not exactly what you've memorized. And when we do these little quizzes, we do bear that in mind. Yeah.
And so is the plan then to sort of grow much more than the 6 then? Is that part of an expansion plan?
I think as we currently stand, we're very happy with the size of our team. I think it's a good size for the size of our company, but we are trying to grow in education more. So there's a lot of schools really like using Construct because it teaches programming concepts in an engaging way instead of just giving students a notepad and say, let's write some Python. That's not much fun. I wouldn't find that much fun either.
So was that always kind of the goal, to be completely drag and drop, as you mentioned earlier? Was that the original goal, to always be like that?
I think yes, it absolutely was the original goal. But as going back to education, when very early on we had schools contacting us saying, "Oh, I want to buy this for my school. How can I do that?" So we created special plans for schools, and then the demands from the school part of our customer base kept growing and growing. Then they have additional demands or requirements. So one of them would be, "I want to write code." So we've resisted that for quite a few years, but it was we saw it as a real value add, and adding the ability to write JavaScript in your game is a real value add for the schools. So we always have a very firm vision of where we're going, but the sort of ship gets steered slightly, guided by customers the way as we go along.
So with the with the stuff with the schools, then, was the original thing? I mean, what were they wanting to do? Were they wanted to teach the kids about design initially before there was any coding in there?
Yes, I think the very early school customers were running after school clubs on make your first video game, basically.
Mm.
So it's very sort of forward thinking, and explorative teachers would take up new interesting products and use them in after school clubs, and that was where it all started. And then from I think mainly from word of mouth, classrooms started buying it as a way to, because although it's drag and drop, you can still teach the principles of coding through drag and drop, loops, variables, functions. So they saw that as a sort of interesting way of introducing students in a classroom setting to the principles of programming. And then the demand then became, well, we want to actually teach them how to code. So that's why we did the JavaScript.
Yeah, I have a brother who's 12 years younger than me, who's probably listening, actually. So hello, Stefan. So he, I remember him using Scratch, where it was kind of drag and drop of like loops and variables and things like that to create small games and things. So do you simplify some of that in the coding, or I mean, how does it work within the engine itself?
So I'd say our block-based system is like halfway between Scratch and programming. So a lot of schools would get students started on Scratch. Scratch is good for what it does, but it's quite a simple approach. It's based around like puzzle pieces. It's quite colourful. It's you can sort of snap your bricks together and set up your game logic that way. Construct's a bit more sophisticated, more sort of like secondary school age. I don't know what the US equivalent of that. If you have US listeners in the UK, it's like from 13 plus would be a good age.
We like to make it an activity podcast, so the listeners in the US or various other parts of the world can go and look up what secondary school is as an equivalent.
There you go. Yeah, that's the British term. You start off with Scratch. It's like puzzle pieces you put together. Move on to Construct's what we call event block system, which you can do a lot more logic, a lot more sophisticated things with it, and use it to make a game. And then, some people, once they get good with Construct and they're familiar with it, they then might move on to programming in JavaScript, in Construct, or programming in other tools. And, some people sort of do graduate onto using Unity and their sort of heavyweight tools in the market. And I think that's a success for us because we've helped sort of train someone and move them along their way in their journey in the game creation world.
So that is like a defined gap, I suppose, in the market. Then were there other competitors around doing that similar sort of step, or do you feel like you just do it differently?
You're right. It's a very good gap, and I think we're quite unique in filling that gap because previously we heard a lot of teachers saying that they would start with Scratch, which is like puzzle pieces you put together, and then they'd move on to Python programming in a terminal. And you think that is a real big jump to make, and you can sort of I think a lot of students will suddenly find that a very difficult step to make. So yeah, I think Construct is good for sort of filling in that gap and helping join things like Scratch to Unity.
Yeah, I think you were underselling yourself before when you were talking about that the plane analogy from the jet. I mean, I think Scratch has got to be the bicycle, surely. The programming in the terminal, maybe that's the prop plane. Maybe at least you're the glider in the middle, I guess. I mean,
Yeah, let's be a glider then. To be honest, I don't know what the controls to a glider look like, so I may come to regret that. But yeah,
it's mostly a joystick, I'm sure. But hopefully we'll have some pilots flying in, writing in to let us know whether we got that right or not. So who else are satisfied customers for you folks then, other than schools?
So we've sold to some big companies, which we're thrilled when it happens. So EA Games have bought licenses from us, Sega, Zynga and King, and also NASA, and we think NASA are using it as a teaching tool in some of their facilities. We hope they're not launching rockets with it because that would concern us slightly.
If they get like a little graphic that you've created to just describe the rocket's trajectory, that would be fantastic.
That would be fine. Yes, yeah.
I do remember seeing. I think some old terms and conditions in old software would specifically say you're not allowed to use the software to run nuclear reactors, presumably to sort of just rule out the possibility that they're implicated in a nuclear disaster.
Roger, if you're listening, we need to add that in.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you should do the same thing about people's space programs, but
yeah. you just listed off a few customers there, a few high-profile ones. I noticed that they were all generally gaming companies, except for NASA.
Yeah, so the gaming companies we think use it for prototyping. As far as we can tell, they're not actually building production games in it. So I think I'm making a few assumptions here, but companies like Zynga and King might have sort of hundreds or maybe even thousands of artists who are sort of putting games together. So we think maybe they're allowing the artists to sort of prototype ideas and show their work in an easy way. And NASA was great selling to NASA. It's absolutely brilliant. It's a nice name to put out there. And we think that's more in the education sort of category, because from what we understand, NASA run education camps, coding camps. They do a lot of sort of outreach like that. It's actually incredibly difficult to you can sell to a big company, but it's incredibly difficult to actually work out what they're using it for. You can send an email saying, "Welcome to Construct. I'm one of the founders. We're thrilled you're using our software. Can you just give us a bit of insight on what you're using it for?" And generally, you get nothing back.
Oh,
So
that's a shame.
it is a big shame. And also, we were going through a sales process with Facebook. We're interested in buying some licenses from us. What's really interesting is, for a small company like us, these big companies put a huge burden on the startup sometimes to actually sell a license. They'll send you, sometimes a 12-page form about how where you keep your backup disks overnight, and huge. I can't overstate how big these forms are, and it's a massive burden for a small company like us, because at the end of filling out this form that might take a couple of hours, they go, actually, no, we don't want to buy, or, oh, great, yes, here's £100 a year. So it's a very difficult burden, but it is a foot in the door of these big organisations that is valuable to go through.
I think Roger had a video call recently with a potentially interested larger company, and they turned up with like a dozen people on the call, and it was just him. And it's like we've got a lot of people, more people on that call than in our company.
That's incredible, actually, when you think about it like that.
Yeah.
Changing tack just a little bit then. So, your platform, your service, your business operates, obviously, I'm taking a look actually at the asset store right now. So you're actually selling assets that people.
Is that why you've been quiet, Sam? You've been on the website. Have you been playing games?
Yeah. But also you obviously sell the games themselves. Now, Elon Musk recently commented on the 30% fee that Apple take for their kind of app store kind of purchases and whatever, and he says it's equivalent to like daylight robbery or something to those. I don't know whether you saw that tweet or I didn't even see the tweet, to be honest. I think I saw someone commenting on it. But so does what's your kind of fee system like on your store, and how did you reconcile that? Obviously, one of you wanted to give these games away, pay as you want, and then the other was like, no, we need to charge for it. So obviously there's morally, there's people stand in different areas when it comes to what does one deserve when you provide a platform versus sell the asset or the game or whatever. So how did that kind of story unfold, and where do you stand on that?
You've made an interesting point, which is very difficult to answer, because we do charge 30% in our asset store. Now, I think the difference is the amount of time we've invested in the asset store is significant, and the amount of resources we've invested in it. So probably to date, we've probably run the asset store at a loss. So it's a long-term endeavor, and I find this you've picked out something very good. Yeah.
I think the key differentiation between, say, us and Apple and Google, who charge a 15 to 30% fee on all their app sales and payments, it's about competition, really. So you can publish to our asset store, and we do take a cut, but you're free to tell other people that your assets are available elsewhere. You're free to sell them elsewhere. You can sell them yourself and manage your own payment system if you prefer to. And these are all things which, Apple and Google, and particularly Apple, really have stringent rules to prevent you doing that. So if you publish an app to the App Store on iPhone, depending on how big a company you are, they'll take 15 to 30% of your revenue. You're not even allowed to tell them that they can buy it anywhere else, like through the website. You're not even allowed to set up your own payment system or inform your customers about any of the alternatives. And you can get kicked off the App Store if you break the rules. And I think these are incredibly onerous, stringent rules which essentially impose a tax on everyone for no reason, with no alternatives to work around it. and at the scale of Apple and Google, this is not something you can work around either. You have to just deal with it. So I think that's a really bad thing for the software industry. It's bad for independent individual developers, small companies who lose a big chunk of their revenue to these billion-dollar tech corporations, and there's very little they can do about it. So yeah, it does. I see your point where we take a cut on our own asset store. So is it that we do the same thing? And I say no, because there's plenty of alternatives for people who sell in their asset store. They can do what they like.
I think there's a difference here as well, in the sense that the assets that you're selling are produced in your software, right?
Not always, no. So you'll have people that sell sound effects. We get a lot of people who sell sound effects packages on our asset store, and you'll see them in every other asset store on the web as well. So it's, with a game, there's so many types of media you can add to it. Graphics, sound effects, backgrounds, animations. So it's just all of those basically, not necessarily made in Construct 3.
The thing with the Apple Store and the App Store and the Play Store, for example, though, is I believe that they'd take certainly the App Store used to take payments for micropayments within the app. They used to take a percentage for the micropayments as well. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but I certainly remember years ago working on the Amazon Prime Video apps that we didn't have any purchase options in the app, because if the purchase was made through the App Store, you had to give 30% to Apple, which was insane, I think.
Yes, that's it. That's the workaround, is you just don't sell anything in the app. We've avoided ever publishing Construct to the app stores, so we don't have to pay such a tax. It's easier for us though, because it's sort of mostly desktop-based software. But yeah, there are sort of some tricky workarounds around. You can pay through the website and then use your account in the app, but you're not allowed to offer payment in the app or tell them that they can do that. And yeah, they're just incredibly stringent rules. And I think like one of the most egregious examples I saw was I think some regulators have required that Apple and Google allow developers to take their own use their own payment system. So you can use Stripe or PayPal and take your own payment for the app from the App Store. So they've been required to do that by regulators. And then what they did is they said, okay, you're allowed to do that, but when you do that, we're going to send you an invoice for 27% of the value of the payment, which you took yourself using your own payment system, because it came from the App Store. And I'm like, who do they think they are? It's like we're not saying to our asset creators that if they sell them anywhere else, we're going to invoice them for 27% because they came from our website or anything. I think that's crazy.
Jesus, yeah.
Well, this is monopoly, though, isn't it? That's
that's
what it is.
And they have a monopoly on mobile apps, so you have to deal with that. Or you can publish your app as a web app. That's the other workaround. Is web publishing is all free. You can manage it yourself. The average payment gateway will take like 2 or 3%. That's the overhead for dealing with payments, which is much lower. But then you have to set up your own payment gateway. So they do offer the convenience of taking the payments for you. But I don't think there's any case for them to charge more than like 5%.
We also need people to find you on the internet as well, and that's real hard work, isn't it?
Yeah, I think these big app stores have a monopoly on the discovery of apps as well. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, my big thing that I'm on at the moment is the fact that we're kind of at the end. It feels to me like we're at the end of the Monopoly game. You've got a couple of big players that have got all of the money.
I do wonder if that's sort of the natural way everything goes in life, in business. So, it all just conglomerates into monopolies eventually. Who knows?
So I have a question, right? You've obviously poured your heart and soul into developing your own physics engines and everything that's kind of working behind the scenes for people to be able to create the games. Have you got any ambitions or anything to kind of open source that or productize any kind of modules from that at all? Because you've obviously got things. What are the big gaming engines now? I mean, no, I actually don't know any.
Unity and Unreal are sort of two of the big sort of engines used for commercial
I'm thinking
games.
more JavaScript libraries, to be honest. There's some JavaScript libraries that you can use to obviously create sprites and get basic games and
Yeah,
stuff
there's a
like
few
that.
libraries out there.
You know, and that's when I asked you earlier about like, are you bootstrapping anything, and you responded with no, it's all bespoke. You know, those are the sorts of libraries I was thinking of. And have you ever thought about dabbling in that and open sourcing, even under a different brand, even like, you know, bit of pocket money, off the side there, just to kind of just sell a few modules, or like I say, a physics engine or something like that? Because if you built something very bespoke, it's obviously very well, it'd be good to try and monetize that as much as you can, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. There's always a lot of possibilities. It's always, firstly, there's sort of two sides to this. There's like, do you want to open source things, and do you want to spin off sort of other side businesses? And there's good options for both. I'm always quite sort of open to the idea of open sourcing bits and pieces, but it's difficult both commercially, because you want to make sure you've got a unique product with unique selling points, and that your competitors aren't just sort of importing your code and using your work in their product. And also, like, running a proper open source project involves good governance and sort of merging contributions and dealing with a few bug reports and such, which is extra work, which time is in short supply for us. So, and for a similar reason, really, it's hard to spin off sort of other commercial side businesses, even though we've had lots of ideas for them over the years. We just don't have enough time. Time is by far our most limited resource. We're both working flat out, enough to get sort of quite, I'm sure everyone who works deals with stress and burnout and things from time to time. There's a lot of pressures with running your own business as well. And the idea of like doing a spin-off, it sounds tempting, and I just don't think we have the time or the resources to pull it off. So I think it's good. It's good to choose to pick your battles and focus and try and do one thing and do it well. Especially when you're a small company or a startup, you have to sort of focus.
See, I cannot take that advice. I'm just too, I don't know. I'm just like, oh, shiny. I stayed up last night and redesigned my website because I just got excited about it. And it's like,
Yeah.
I just pick up things, and I know I should focus, but you know, this
I'm
isn't about
I'm
me.
similar, and the Construct website is one of the first things in my life I've really just poured everything into, and I'm very similar. I'm easy to pick up new things and start new things. But I think, you know, even though we're talking about not doing a spin-off, I always thought one really interesting possibility in the future would be the HTML UI library we've built. That would be a really interesting separate product, or maybe some sort of open source, quasi open source project where, you know, where people could build applications in the browser, because there are options out there, but they tend to get bloated, and I think we've got something quite special with what we've built.
So on that UI then front, what's your focus, if any, on user experience when it comes to, because you obviously want to have something that's very, very easy to build. Where does that inspiration come from to, obviously it's succeeding. Obviously schools want to use it. NASA wants to train their engineers on it. There's obviously a great user experience there. Where did that inspiration come from, and do you have someone specifically dedicated to that, or are you just obviously someone's naturally gifted? Being, assuming we're all technology enthusiasts here, we don't tend to have a particular skill set for design.
Well, I think in the terms of the software usability, that's something I'm not a specialist in user experience, but it's something I've worked a long time in, and it's something I'm passionate about. I'm keen to make software which is really easy to use, intuitive, and makes it clear how to use it, and if anything's gone wrong, why it's gone wrong. I've always thought you can probably measure the quality of software in the error messages. I'm probably going to get tweeted a bunch of unclear error messages in Construct now. I've said that. But yeah, it's something I'm passionate about. It's something that I've always been passionate about is software quality, and there's a lot of rubbish software out there. Everyone's seen it, everyone's used it, everyone's been driven mad by it. And so I've always been driven by this idea that I want to make something that's really nice, like a polished, nice to use piece of software that is easy to use and difficult to go wrong and such. Of course, the practice is that's the ideal, but the practice of it is incredibly difficult. And even now, we're sort of fixing bugs and sort of little corners of the software where things are confusing or don't work very well. that customers get in touch with us. And I'm passionate about making sure we try and fix all the bugs and everything, but it's just endless. And I think, I fear for the fate of the software industry, but I wonder if maybe it just can't be done. There's two types of software. There's like NASA have 1,000 people who incredibly carefully check the software for their Mars rovers to make sure they absolutely, definitely will completely work no matter what. And even then, there's that case where someone mixed up centimeters and inches, and the thing just bombed into the surface of Mars. And then all other software just doesn't work.
Well, that's a perfect place to plug our Code in Space episode with Rakesh. We actually spoke to an engineer who went through this kind of basically 3 times testing of code, that goes through on the various satellites and rovers and various things like that. But yeah, no, I commend you. I mean, it's obviously, like I say, natural talent is obviously paying off because people are able to use it. You are succeeding in that simplicity, but to do all that whilst thinking of the tech side as well, that's just a lot going on. I'm with you. Like, I really care about the usability. My first foray into that is like CMS. Building a CMS, people just think a CMS is just there to put in the data, but it's like, no, you're designing for 2 people here. You've got the front end, you've got the CMS. We need to think of that user experience and make it as simple as possible, and having stuff that doesn't work. And it's just a lot going on when you're responsible for the tech side as well. So
I think what's really important to us is when we moved Construct into the browser, so it runs fully in the browser. It has, there's this whole image of software that runs in the browser just being crap, basically. It's slow. You click a button, you have to wait. And what's key for us is we have to make this is productivity software. It has to be responsive. It has to feel like a native Windows program. You click on something, it's instant. So that was a huge focus. And there's enough bad web software out there.
Yeah, that's kind of a point we want to prove, that you can make great software on the web.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And so that's the difference between Construct 2 and Construct 3 then, right?
Yeah, Construct 2 was a Windows desktop app. So you'd have to download and install it, and it would only work on Windows and couldn't run it on Mac or anything else. And Construct 3 is all in the browser, so it just loads straight away. Don't have to install anything.
When we first started selling Construct 3 is really interesting. A lot of customers were like, oh no, in the browser, horrible. And then we get emails from people, those same people, a month later saying, I absolutely love it, and I forget I'm using it in the browser. And it's like, that's great. That's what we're going for. So that's really good.
And so have you found that the customer base has grown then from going into the browser now that you've opened up the operating systems to Mac and Linux, I suppose?
Yeah, we have a lot of people using Chromebooks, and that's big in education. So I think even a couple of years ago now, something like 50% of laptops used in US schools were Chromebooks. So if you want to be in the education market, you've got to be on a Chromebook.
What is the platform built in currently?
So it's all JavaScript, HTML, and CSS.
So you mentioned WebAssembly earlier for the physics. Are there any ambitions to move the platform itself onto WebAssembly? Because I think that is just native. I'm doing air quotes there for the listeners. Native web, but on steroids. The kind of performance you get, the sort of stuff that you can do. Is there? Have you got your eyes set on WebAssembly, or is the physics stuff a foray into that? Like anything around there?
It's a very interesting technical question, and there's a lot of fairly difficult trade-offs involved in that. In short, it might not necessarily be faster if you go to all that trouble. JavaScript is incredibly fast these days. We've actually done benchmarks that shows it can outperform some competitors with native engines. And I think that's one of those perception issues that we still deal with. People assume web stuff is slow or JavaScript is slow, and it's not. It was the case several years ago, but things have changed now. If you search the web, there's some other people have done some good blog posts about the topic where WebAssembly can be, but isn't necessarily faster than JavaScript. And then if you write code in a different language and compile it to WebAssembly, it significantly, in my view, that would significantly complicate the development workflow. So now you have a compile step, and you're writing code in a different language, and debugging is more complicated. Whereas in JavaScript, you have really great browser developer tools, and there's no compiler. You just write code, and you reload the page. So I think it's an interesting idea, and it's good for things like the physics engine. But I don't think it's necessarily a good idea to broaden that out into everything else, especially when you've already got JavaScript code.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I look at things like Figma and look at that because that's built in WebAssembly, and I think the sort of functionality there is not necessarily faster. It's more so what is capable. What are we capable of doing within WebAssembly? And I'm just baffled at some of the stuff we can do with that. So no ambitions there. No goal to move over, because that means new hires then, right? That means you've got to.
Well, that's part of the thing. Is if you want to be productive, really you want a shallow technology stack. And I'm a big believer in simplicity and having as few moving parts as you possibly can. It simplifies it, it makes you more productive, and it makes it easier to make sure things work. So I don't think we don't have any ambition to sort of compile the entire engine to WebAssembly, but there may be bits and pieces. So WebAssembly is good for picking off a component which needs maximum performance, like a physics engine, and just being used for that and integrating with JavaScript. So, if we added a new feature which needed like a really high performance, like single bit, that could work in WebAssembly. But again, it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be that JavaScript would be perfectly good for that.
So before we close it off and talk about the future of gaming, I have one more question about your store, your app store. I don't know if you want to call it that, but like, how do you maintain quality control of the games? If anything, is it kind of anyone can just upload and that's it, or do you have a review process that you go through?
The biggest quality control we have is we charge a small fee to be able to sell in the App Store, so we're not overwhelmed. And that small barrier there means that if people aren't willing to pay the fee, they don't think they're going to make that much money. So that's the number one quality control. Then we do have a review process. You can, once you're in, you can submit as many assets as you want, and we have a sort of quick look over it and just say, yeah, that's good to go.
Fair enough. So where do you stand? Where do you see the future of these types of platforms, these types of products that you the editor that you built and things like that? Where are you? What are you seeing on the horizon in your vertical?
Well, I think the web is an incredible technology platform, and in the past 10 years, it's transformed completely. And I think it's already capable of running most software and most games. Perhaps not the very top sort of 3D graphically intensive games, but it can do an awful lot. An awful lot of content out there could run on the web, and probably doesn't. I think there's a lot of complex things about the software world, but I think part of the problem is the perception is behind on that. And I think over the next 10 years, we'll see the perception start to catch up. And I think there's also a commercial incentive for more things to move to the web because of the App Store fees. And so I think the web is the best hope against fighting back against those fees. If more people can make web apps, web content, and monetize them, that's the important thing, and make sure people can find them, then that will be a brighter future for the technology world, I think. And small companies and independent developers will hopefully be more successful because especially if they don't have to pay the App Store fees. So yeah, I think I'm a big believer in the web as the future of software, but we'll see what happens.
I think in our vertical specifically as well, I think I see a lot of our competitors sort of added HTML5 exports in their platform sort of as an afterthought, sort of unwilling afterthought, and we're sort of dragging them along a little bit. And I think they will realise in the future the importance of the web, and they'll be putting more focus into sort of supporting web technologies. I'm not sure to what extent, but
I think it's already the case that we have one platform running in HTML5, which covers Android, iOS, Windows, Mac, Linux, the web, and so it does all of them, and it's great. It works really well. It's high performance. It's got loads of features, and it's got that cross-platform consistency. And I think a lot of companies might, if maybe they'll come down to the same kind of line of thinking that we've got. They might be scratching their heads thinking like, why are we going to so much trouble to maintain all these different code bases when actually the HTML5 one could work well on all of them. But the thing is, if they've added HTML5 as an afterthought, that's going to put them in a difficult position, because really you want a high quality web export. And that's sort of where our foresight has worked out quite well, really.
Nice. And then finally, the future of your platform. Then, have you got any tidbits that you can share, divulge of any upcoming features or launches that you've got planned?
Well, I think I can sort of hint at something might be coming up in the next couple of months. After talking about potential spin-offs and how we're not doing them, we're going to do one.
That was a quick turnaround.
Yeah, well, the thing is, we've been in business for like 10 years, and so this is the first time. That whole time we were just focusing on Construct for game creation software, and we think Construct has uses outside of game creation as well. And so we think there's a good opportunity to spin off Construct for another kind of market, and hopefully we'll be making an announcement in the next couple of months about that. So stay tuned. And yeah, we think we can do that in a way which both adds a lot of value and is not a total nightmare for us to maintain. So it's not a completely different kind of product, which is going to make our lives really hard for having to maintain two different things. It's kind of it's like a kind of a subset of the product addressed at a new market. So that's something we'll have coming along soon.
And it's a big step. It's a big step for us because like talking adding your first employee, sort of adding your second product is similar. Similar challenges, similar problems. So we're very excited, and it's a big step for us.
Well, on that bombshell, I'd like to thank you, Tom and Ashley, for your time. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast, and yeah, I've got my eyes on the future of Construct.
Super. It's great talking to you both. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, I hope you can tell that we really enjoyed that episode. It was great to have Tom and Ashley come on the show, and we love Construct 3.
Yeah, really good, really good. Well, with that, thanks for tuning in. And if you enjoyed the episode, then of course, on YouTube, you can give us a like. For you podcast listeners, you can show your support by giving us a 5-star review on whatever podcasting platform you're listening to. Subscribe to capture the next episode, and support the show on buymeacoffee.com/thattechshow, all one word. That's buymeacoffee.com/thattechshow to show your support, to give us money. Was that too threatening? We'll see you in 2 weeks.